Okay, welcome everybody. This is Shawn Parker, and we have a really special guest with us once again, a gentleman by the name of Will Ireland. Will is running for Franklin County Municipal Court. Will is a practicing attorney and has been very, very involved in local politics in central Ohio, not necessarily just Franklin County, because I always say Franklin County spills out into the surrounding region. But we're very interested in learning about how Will came to us, your background, and it's going to be a fun listen for a little bit with a conversation with Will Ireland. So Will, welcome to joining us, and tell us a little bit about why you're here.
Shawn, good to meet you. Thank you so much for being here. This is a fabulous studio. Gracious of you to invite me. I want to start in the middle of things, how I got involved in politics. As a lawyer, I practice in front of a myriad of judges. In fact, on a regular day, I may be in front of any 30 of judges just in Columbus, and not all of them, of course, on the same day, but that's the type of field that we face as defense counsel or a prosecutor. And the way that I got involved in politics was supporting the judges that were good at what they did, protecting them from removal, and that, fortunately, we still elect our judges in Ohio. Of course, federal judges are appointed for life, but I think it's effective to have elected judges because we can remove jurists. And as one great jurist once told me, a judge's reputation catches up with them in about 10 years. So if it's necessary to move somebody on, we can do that. So that's how I became involved. I come to you because I am a Buckeye. I was actually born in Ann Arbor, and but the point is this. My father was studying up. He was a Rhodes Scholar. He was studying up in Michigan.
Oh, wow. That's impressive.
Yes. Well, he studied in Europe and elsewhere. He ultimately became a premier architect for Ohio under Governor Rhodes, designed the Ohio Historical Center. His father founded Big Bear, which was the first supermarket in the world. So, I come from an illustrious background, but I want you to understand that there's no heirs there. That is, I'm a child of affluence, but by the same token, from our, Appalachian root, from the Irelands to the Rileys, our commitment to this country, I have deep roots in this community, notwithstanding. As I came up as a young person while studying here in Columbus at Columbus Academy, my family was split. I wound up being sent away to boarding school. By the time I got to my college years, the family trajectory was out of gas. So I bootstrapped myself. I put myself through college, through ROTC, became commissioned through the Buckeye Battalion, was second on the Order of Merit list from Ohio State University. And having the right stuff, went into aviation. So I became a combat aviator, a school-trained Aero Scout. I flew Scout Kiowas on the demilitarized zone in Korea.
Oh, wow.
I later deployed to Iraqi freedom and enduring freedom Afghanistan in the course of my career. I was a probation officer. And while I was a probation officer full-time, so I came off of active duty, became employed as a probation officer, at night went through law school. So I had 10 years, Shawn, where I was involved directly in the courts, working for judges, observing how to behave, how to act, their demeanor, what the process was about while I went to law school at night.
Amazing. So probation officer, that's kind of interesting. I mean, that story is, I guess in one sense, it is a classic American story. It is a Franklin County story, but it is a story of somebody who obviously you're very service-oriented. I mean, that background that you had coming to the fact that you then served in the armed forces, Korea, which is pretty interesting situation over there even today. And then probation officer, working with people who are trying to get their lives back on track. Maybe some are, maybe some aren't. How did that affect you as a person in terms of looking at your fellow man and understanding the nature of good and evil?
Wow. Great question, Shawn. And just to detail one brief point. When I was in Korea, the demilitarized zone, there's no peace settlement there. We're at a ceasefire.
Yeah.
So, my father would have been, in the 50s, 51. In fact, that's when he served in the Air Force during the Korean War itself. But after the ceasefire, that's when I was in Korea. I went there because it was a hot place.
Okay.
As a soldier, you want to go, you want to do your job, you want to learn your trade. So,
yeah.
But what did it all teach me? I think that, for one thing, as a probation officer, you resource individuals. So you may come to the job with more enforcement-minded or more enforcement-oriented, law enforcement-oriented intentions, but you quickly learn that there's people who have not been properly resourced, who've not been shown what right looks like. How can I convey that? How can I communicate to this person? And how can I provide him or her with the tools to succeed under a difficult and potentially hostile circumstance? In other words, much of what drives our criminal docket and the criminal subculture of our society is poverty. That is, you don't most oftentimes seeing wealthy committing economic crimes, though they do, assuredly, and we need to be cognizant of that. The point is finding a means to help people to give them the wraparound resources they need. Most oftentimes, and when I would get a new judge as a probation officer, I would help them understand what also was driving the train, and most oftentimes it was drugs, sometimes alcohol, but these are the kind of societal problems that present through other means to the court as a criminal complaint or charge, whether it's drug trafficking, theft, a consequent assault, robbery, or burglary, or murder. A lot of times these things are origins. There's a lot of complex things that build up to that sort of things. As a probation officer, you begin to see these folks as individuals and human beings, and you look to how you can help them.
Yeah. Yeah, I think back on myself. I was swim team coach, dive team coach down at Marion Franklin in the summertime. And I saw kids that were just wonderful kids. Just happened not too long ago. I'll keep his name back, but I found out that he died dealing drugs in the past 5 years. And this was a kid that was the nicest kid from a good family, but the family had challenges. And I didn't realize how the deck was stacked against this kid. But looking back in retrospective, I could see it. And there were other people that was just very clear. I mean, the kids were raising themselves, things of that sort. And I always say that's society failing. That is us as a group of people not taking care of business the way that we need to. But it's such a juxtaposed, challenging question to figure out how we can better serve people. Along that line, let me talk a little bit about specialty dockets in the court system then, because one thing, you touched on drugs, you touched on poverty. I know that we have a mental health docket as well. We have a veterans court. What's your thoughts on the specialty dockets? To me, it seems like they are really, really effective in what they do. Do you like them? Do you think they can be improved or expanded? Any thoughts on that?
Shawn, I had no idea the depth of your knowledge of our courts. Most folks don't know this. Specialty dockets are absolutely critical. One of the things that I mentioned was resources, and you mentioned the veterans docket. If elected, I'll be the only veteran on the court. We no longer, Judge Barrows.
Wow.
I'm running for Judge Barrows. Yes,
okay.
Sir. I'm running for Judge Barrows' seat. Judge Barrows is the last and only veteran left on the municipal court.
I'm astonished.
Yes. Well,
okay.
and that's the strange truth. Common pleas, I've heard rumor, and I haven't verified whether or not we even have a veteran on that court anymore since Judge Reese, formerly Colonel Reese, is since now retired from the bench.
Okay.
There is one jurist over there that I need to check up on to see. Apparently, I was told he may be, but it's interesting because our service members have not been just compulsorily attracted to the bench. And we need those folks. And it goes back to specialty docket and what I was talking about, resourcing people for success. The veterans docket, when I first heard about such a thing, especially docket, I was like, why would veterans be accepted and why are we making them special? And why, you know what? These folks deserve to be held accountable like everybody else, and they are. The significance of the veterans docket is you have the resources present at court during sanction to provide counseling, whether in or outpatient, for anger management, for drugs and alcohol, or health problems or mental health problems that they're presenting or that are discernible by the court. The Veterans Administration, though roundly criticized over the past, 4 or 5 years, has made vast and extensive gains. And I've got to say one thing about the Wiley Clinic here in Columbus. I'm treated like, folks, ladies and gentlemen, I am treated like, for lack of other, a prince. It is one of the best systems in the world. I am so grateful that I qualified for such a thing because I've had health problems. I've served for 30 years in the military. I've had consequent health problems as a result of that. I've been able to obtain the counseling that I needed for things that I was dealing with. I've been able to receive medical treatments for the ailments that I received while being paratrooped to the frontiers of freedom or being out in places where we were exposed to things that we don't see in modern society today.
Yeah.
So I'm profoundly grateful for that. And I think probably one of the most significant things with the specialty docket is just that. You can get people resourced, and you also get to folks that are very effective at dealing with those sorts of things. You mentioned the mental health docket.
Uh-huh.
To be in earnest, I have a difficult time with my mental health clients.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like if I tell someone a third time, it should suffice. Mental health folks sometimes need a little bit more care than that.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's challenging for me to be fully effective in communicating with them. But once you get somebody to the right place in the courts when there's specialty dockets, like a mental health court, and the way that Judge Moorhart runs that today, it's an effective handoff, and that person is going to be taken care of now by somebody who's especially good in that area, as I would be for Judge Barrow's seat. The Veterans Court has been transferred to a non-veteran. He's a great jurist, and he does a good job. I would like to be able to be available to the court to provide that type of leadership to our veterans when they need it, because we identify as veterans as a type.
Uh-huh.
So the specialty dock has been very effective, and Judge Thomas is doing a great job, and Judge Tyak is doing a great job, both with the catch and the drug court, respectively. They're just doing a brilliant job, and we need that kind of specialty work today in combating the societal problems that we're facing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's the highlight of the future of the way that we look at the marriage of the court system and the people to solve problems rather than to simply judiciate through process the situations that happen. You mentioned Judge Moorhart. I'll put a shout out to her. She's a personal friend, and I had long conversations about the amazing things that happened there. Judge Stephanie Mingo, who is up for re-election right now, her court system, they bring in, I think at one point we had 14 or 15 agencies sitting in there to help people with their housing problems, with their hoarding problems. There's overlaps where they work together. But if people think that the modern court system looks like Judge Judy on TV, it doesn't. It is a results-oriented, fixing problems-focused type of scenario in most cases that I know of, and with the ones that really care. So along that line, so we talk about social issues and justice when those two items come together. How should a judge look at that, or how do you believe that a court should interpret a person coming in with social issues? Does the law apply evenly to those people, or how does what's the magic in the mixture there for the right recipe?
Great question, and a difficult one, because it comes to discerning, what represents a real threat to the community and where we need to resource or help somebody resolve their problems. I think what's interesting also about the question is in its genesis is the way that the court has been drawn in. And what I mean to say, and you mentioned Judge Judy earlier, the courts are no longer about demeaning people, talking down to people, telling them that they're wrong, or they need to pay this or do that or serve time. Or now, let's face it, I mean, community service, though an honor, in some ways a good sanction. So you sanction folks accordingly, but more specifically to what the courts have done, and there's people that are not happy about this in the system, and that is I think some of the elder practitioners, like, why is the court, and some of the older judges were bothered by the courts being drawn into the sociology, the social process that we have in society today. And it was their job to adjudicate, hey, you were in possession of this drug, you'll serve this time, this is what you'll do. Just not that way anymore, and we can't afford to be that way because we haven't solved a problem by caging someone. Mm-hmm. It's just not effective in resolving a problem. It doesn't mean that people who are selling dangerous drugs that are lethal and killing our children, our families, our friends, our fathers, our mothers, our sisters and brethren, it doesn't mean that we have to tolerate that. There's sanctions for that, and there's degrees to which those things are adjudicated based upon the nature and level of the charge. For the municipal court, at the misdemeanor level, as a jurist, we need to be cognizant of how we can help people, what we can do. Does it become a function of the social issue? In other words, I come from a fatherless household.
Mm-hmm.
I was raised by a single mother who may have had drug problems herself. You look to Hillbilly Elegy and J.D. Vance's story,
mm-hmm.
and here's an American story of someone who bootstrapped themselves and did what they should have done because they knew right from wrong and persisted in that. But there was also that paraclete. There was the cleft. There was the grandmother. There was the maternal figure who was able to provide that safe haven and safe harbor for that that young person to survive and thrive in a more than difficult, challenging, and hostile environment. And oftentimes folks don't have that. So the court needs to be empathetic to those circumstances. We can't relieve people of responsibility of their misconduct.
Mm-hmm.
That's not the function of any court. It may be in mitigation, because once we adjudicate or determine a degree of culpability or guilt of an act, then we can look at how we properly sanction that person. And again, in the misdemeanor division, it's not about incarceration. It just simply isn't.
Yeah.
We have, before they started constructing and before COVID, we had an institution, Jackson Pike, which was known as the Workhouse, which constructed for about 1,200 people.
Mm-hmm.
It could bulge to about 1,500. It routinely, daily and early and often, bulged over 2,000 inmates a day.
Wow.
It went, and it went well beyond that. And those type of crowding circumstances create situations that are not fair to anyone.
Yeah.
It's not even fair to the jailer to be sympathetic to what are the responsibilities of the state and government to manage a system that was appearing in some means to be at a breaking point.
Mm-hmm.
I think, and this may be one of the unusual or secondary, tertiary benefits of COVID, and believe me, if anybody has anything positive to say about COVID, right?
It's made us re-examine a lot of things, that's for sure. So.
It's interrupted all, especially for seniors. But the point is, one thing it has done is make us look hard and long at who's going to be, incarcerated. And I think that was an important benefit. The way that the system is operating today is improved from that aspect. So do you think about those sorts of social factors? Yes, in mitigation, but it does not impact things up front in terms of culpability under most circumstances, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. I think, sometimes bad things happen to good people. Sometimes bad people make bad things happen. And knowing the difference between the two, having that gift of discernment and wisdom is one of the hallmarks, I think, of really good judges. And, it's interesting, you mentioned early on that you practice in front of as many as 30 judges a day, or your dockets touch that many people. Are we headed in the right direction? Is crime is it getting worse? Is it getting better? I guess it's a very general kind of question. Are we headed in the right direction, or do we need to make some major corrections?
Great question. I am cognizant of, canons 3 and 4 in terms of what I can comment on in terms of a judicial candidate, and just the cautionary note there.
Mm-hmm.
But I think most importantly, today, Columbus is on another record year for homicide. Last week we breached over 150, and by the way, it's
Unreal.
Early September. The summer's not over, and we've had over 150 homicides in Columbus, second year in a row for record homicides. So to suggest that we're headed in the right direction, I think would probably be elusive of reality.
Good point.
And I think that's why I'm running for judge, Shawn. I listened to a candidate yesterday on a campaign trail, and he indicated that the good candidate is the one that doesn't need the job. And the truth is, I don't need this job. I'm doing this job because I hear and I sense a call to duty. We talked about service and duty. I'm not dependent on that. Yes, I did 30 years in boots, 30 years in the military between active duty, reserve, and guard, and activated multiple times and have since retired. But I don't need to be in public service. I've effectively developed a solo practice, and I'm a solo practitioner. I can sustain my family at a sufficient level without this job. I'm running for this position because I care about this community to the bottom of my soul, because it's my great-grand, my father's and my grandfather's, my mother's and my grandmother's world, our neighborhood collectively as a people that needs continued protection, needs our Constitution, needs the things that were instilled in our government by the Constitution of the United States that needs to continue to be protected. And to suggest that we're on the right course is I guess why I'm running for judge, because I want to make sure that we do stay on the right course. When I go before any of 30, and what I'm talking about is the common pleas court, which is the felony division,
Mm-hmm.
and the municipal court for which I'm running, which is comprised of 15 judges, different judges, depending upon the way that you count. And you mentioned Judge Mingo, our environmental judge, who also runs a wonderful specialty docket, as you mentioned. But the point is, the number of judges that we appear in front of need to be capable of discerning of what is proof beyond a reasonable doubt and what those protections are. And sometimes, that is the reason that I'm running. I feel that I will effectively fulfill that role based on my experience, both as a veteran, as a community member, as a practitioner, and as a former probation officer, watching the judges that I grew up with as a young person and how they adjudicated cases.
You're clearly a man of service and clearly articulate and a lot of intellect going on there, which I love when we get to talk with people as well-educated and articulate as yourself.
Thank you, Shawn.
Thinking as we go forward, I believe that in the next 10 years, that the entire court system is going to start seeing things they've never seen before because of technology, because of computerization, municipal court, self-driving cars, just being one of the many things that are going to start appearing into the horizon where laws are not keeping up with technology. Are we prepared to deal with that? Is our Constitution strong enough to deal with the future as it comes to us in a different way with all the things that I can't even comprehend, artificial intelligence and those things? Is our court system ready for that?
I would say not at present, and the court systems sometimes are advanced of. Sometimes they're drug kicking and screaming. Much the way that the courts were drug into the social issues and having developed specialty dockets, which they've effectively done and done a good job of. But it's a great question because I think it hinges and contends upon what will be the interpretation of the Constitution. And when you talk about self-driving cars and the technology there, those sorts of things, I mean, there is a plethora of material there. There's the floodgates of things that are going to be happening that the courts are going to have to make decisions on that may not have been precisely contemplated by the founders of the Constitution. So they draft a specific provision or article in the Constitution regarding Facebook or privacy, and, right, on Twitter or electronic media or social media, and of course the answer is absolutely not. But here's the key and important point on that. There's two documents that are very important here. The Declaration of Independence, which is simply that, which brings forth what is natural law derived from man and our struggles and the things that we were granted as inalienable, and then the Constitution, which many folks say is, hey, it's a restriction on. Well, it's also an empowerment of government. So our Constitution is an empowerment government that limits the government on how far it will go in terms of federalism, and then the enumerated responsibilities of the state and what they're supposed to do. And the key is the Bill of Rights, which is what gives us our rights, which gives us our protections, which restricts government from overreaching. And sometimes and oftentimes, or it has and it does, but that's the relevance there. So how that Constitution will be interpreted when it comes to the new things that we'll be facing with technology is what is important, because the Constitution is specific in the way that it enumerates both powers and limitations on government.
Okay.
And the text, the original text, can be applied. Now, it's been said, and I think that this can be confusing because it's a living document. Now, I don't know how and of course, proof by analogy is a failure of reason. A document, it does not breathe, it does not have a pulse. The words have meaning, and they should be interpreted by their meaning. So when jurists decide an outcome because they feel that's the way it should be, that type of mentality, which has been qualified as progressive and being a super legislator, if I may, being cognizant of canons 3 and 4 and what are, I'm not specifically commenting on anything in controversy or anything pending before any court at this point.
Yes.
And my point is that my view of the Constitution is that it is the authority. A judge is not the authority. The judge simply interprets what the text was originally intended to mean, and that can and will be applied to the issues that will confront the courts, both in the development and proliferation of technology that they will be seeing and the courts are looking at today and tomorrow. But the Constitution is the authority, and it needs to be interpreted, not used as a method to write new laws or be a super legislator and come up with different meanings of what the words mean, what the words were intended.
Absolutely. No, good point. And thank you for answering the question with that much depth, because I think that is a critical question that people really need to contemplate, and that it is not a yes, no type of thing or a simple classification. It really is a deep, deep
Well, and
question.
that's the problem. These are not. The truth is that the breadth of this document, the profundity, the profoundness of the document, it's as the governing authority of the United States. We came here. They had no idea how big this place was. It was the New World. They didn't know where it ended.
And it kept getting bigger.
Yes, and Washington said, I'm going to have a continental army, meaning we don't know where that is, but this is my army, and it's the Continental Army. They didn't know until 1806 just how far it went. But I guess my point is, the Constitution, it's not just so simple, and it's not a soundbite that can be reduced, and that's why folks, I think, on some occasions are lost in the process, and it becomes an easy hallmark to say it's a living constitution, it's a living document, and what that's entitling by that view is to discern or decide outcomes based upon an individual's interest on how they'd like to see something personally be resolved, and that's not the job of a judge again, Shawn. I'm sorry for going back down the rabbit hole, but that is one of the things that we need to educate our children to, and have them, because we have to win. At every generation, we have to win our freedom back. Mm-hmm. We have to step off every day to know that our liberties and freedoms are in jeopardy.
Yeah.
And if we don't face, and we have to fight for justice. We have to fight for justice every day, and I do for my clients, and it's important. And I want to see that as a judge. I want to see people protecting individuals' rights, my neighbors, our community members. There's been a lot of overreach in terms of government, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. In my opinion, and I think that we need judges who are willing to protect the community in every way.
And you're stating that from the perspective of someone who defends people.
Yes.
So you see the big hand out there from time to time. And the hand, while it can do many good things, can also overstep itself.
It can, and it can be abusive, and it can be unfair. And I find that sometimes for convenience, the courts are maybe too quick and fast. Quick and fast. And that's the beauty of some of the things that we discussed previously, especially docket and those sorts of things.
Yeah.
And in some ways, court's got to slow down. It's got to slow down to get its job done. We get in a hurry, and people need to come away. I was welcomed by Judge Tyak to his court the other morning, and I know my client felt good, because as soon as we were able to resolve our case, mm-hmm. Judge Tyak welcomed this man to the well of his court, and he said, "You know what? You're now in my specialty dock, and I want to welcome you."
Wow, that's an impressive human reach from the court to the people.
Yeah, Alyssa Peters, judge down in Pickaway County Municipal Court. I had a client who had a horrible stutter, and bless his heart, he presented poorly to the police because he couldn't speak his mind as a consequence of an immutable trait that he was, he had this thing. Maybe he could if provided, the psychological resources to hinder the stutter or work past it. But the point is this: she said to me, I said, "Your Honor, I want you to consider my client." She goes, "I empathize. Mm-hmm. I empathize with your client." So every day. Here I got a judge who's empathizing with a man who's been accused of doing something wrong. I'm now in the winning lane as an advocate for this man. My point is this: every day I live and learn something that's effective in addressing others with respect. And it's something that I learned as a probation officer that I failed to mention earlier. Respect. RESPECT.
Yeah.
And you know what? I'm human, and I'm frail, and I have weaknesses. And you know what? I've been accused of a short fuse too, but you know what? That's something that moderates with time and age, and I have both of those.
I hope it does. My wife hope it does.
Yes,
so
sir.
It does, I'm
I
sure.
think, and family, what an important thing,
Yeah. No, that's beautiful. You see the humanity of the individual, and I think that's one of the keys. So another thought is accessibility and ease of interaction with the court. I know a lot of big metro markets actually will have multiple locations. They will have night courts, things that are very, very available, making the court approachable, and people don't necessarily have to take off work to go to court. Do we have the resources, the funding to do that in Central Ohio and in the municipal court that you're running for? And if we do have the funding, is that a good idea?
Shawn, that's a great question. I'm so glad you answered it, because it hadn't been something that I've given much thought to, but the truth is we had a night court, and it was part of the
I didn't realize that. Okay.
Yeah, we had a night prosecutor's office, and it wasn't arbitration. It was an alternative dispute resolution. So it was very effective in terms of addressing problems. I think the most interesting thing about the courts, and this was decided some years ago, based on my experience, and I want to say it was in the late '90s. Kind of, Franklin County seems to set everything at 9 a.m.
Yeah, that's
Right.
our start. That's our start time here in
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
most productive city in Ohio. I call it because
Right.
we go to work hard.
Right, that's right. And we we sleep in on Saturday. And we enjoy it. We go to church on Sunday. A lot of us. But the point is this: how is it that I've got 5 cases at 9 a.m. in the morning when it would be more effective the way that some of our smaller outliers do? And one of the benefits being private practitioners, I've not practiced in all 88 counties, but I've been in quite a few of them.
Okay.
And a lot of folks who come to the bench are creatures of the system. They haven't practiced privately. They've been solely at one place and only seen a very narrow view. So this is how we do it here, and that's how we do it. Well, I've been to other places where they do it more effectively, and spreading those dockets out through the day reduces crowding. It makes a more effective jurist and litigants or adversaries because they're not crowded in with other people. They can approach the court with a little bit more ease and not being in a hurry to be in 5 different places at the same time. I think it's absolutely fascinating and a brilliant point to bring up night docket to avoid interrupting people's jobs, because we can't expect them, and especially in today's society and as fast-paced as it is, because frankly we've accelerated multifold in the past decennial period. We're moving so quickly now, and to take somebody out of a job and potentially jeopardize employment is the wrong answer. So I would be very interested, and I would certainly be willing, because you can bet I certainly have and did and am willing in the future, have in the past and willing in the future, to work well past 5 o'clock. And I do today. I do today as a private practitioner. So why are the courts abruptly closing at 4 or 5, depending upon the jurisdiction, when there's folks that are not able to be there? So being amenable to individual schedules would be something that I would be more than willing and excited to entertain, and also parsing out the docket throughout the morning and other litigation in the afternoon to accommodate the litigants or folks before the court. It would be a excellent change in the system as it exists in Franklin County today.
Wow. So in terms of 2 highlights, maybe what do we do better than anybody else in Franklin County in our legal system? And what should we be working on in our legal system? What's our high and what's our low?
I think we're good in the Franklin County Common Pleas Court at getting people trials when they need them. Even when it comes to the COVID, we have made every effort to deliver there. Now, we have in many instances, in the short term failed, but we're working hard to deliver justice in that way. I think what we don't do well is the logistics of it. That is, we have a municipal court. Hamilton County has combined their clerk's office for the municipal, which is your misdemeanor, and for the felony, the common pleas, they have one operating clerk, which is very effective.
It's always seemed redundant to me. I was like, why do we have 2 different things doing two different governmental bodies doing the same thing? It just seems like a double expense.
Well, and speaking of doing it not so good, same thing with security. So there's instances where I have to, as a private citizen, I have to unbelt. There's things that I have to take off, but public employees are free to walk through security. Now, it doesn't look good when I'm standing there with my client in a jury trial. And we have to unbelt, we have to stand down, we have to unmetal, we have to take everything off and go through metal detectors, but the judge and prosecutor just breeze through without, and it also, frankly, it looks bad. And being sensitive to the situation, how do you feel as a minority person when you're standing there and you're told you got to take all these garments off and you have to be checked and wanded when there's white guys breezing through and police not being asked or checked? And those are, truth be told, just because you're a public employee doesn't entitle you to access beyond the folks that are paying for your salary, your heating and cooling, your HVAC, your pens, paper, pencils, electronic media, all those things that you use in your job, or the very courthouse that comforts you against the elements.
Yeah.
So it's there are some issues there that I think that can use improvement. And as a judge, I think I'd be better equipped to address those things through the administrative system that is present there. And also as a private practitioner, a lot of folks, Shawn, come up through the system.
Yes.
So you don't see a lot of judges. They're out there, but you see a lot of judges come from the prosecutor's office or some other place. And the same goes for appointed judges. A lot of times they're from administrative agencies and others. But as a private citizen and as a private practitioner, as a sole practitioner, I find myself increasingly encumbered in Franklin County by arbitrary situations that are more like, okay, this is my piece of the pie. I control it, so I get to manage this security. You can't come in here. You have to strip, or you have to go over here. I had a close personal friend and colleague who was told that they needed to see, and it was a private thing. They needed to see her insulin pump.
Oh, wow.
She was in a hurry.
Okay.
She didn't have time to do that, and she ultimately wound up being publicly embarrassed unnecessarily. And I just, there's things that we don't do well there that we can improve, and we can. And I'm convinced that we can restore the grandeur, of the capital city through participation in elections and voting for people that will make appropriate changes as the opportunity presents.
Yeah. Well, that's one of our goals, is that people have an opportunity to hear from the folks who are running, so they can establish a relationship and understand who the good people are. And you clearly come at this from a very unique perspective. You've defended people, worked with them in the probationary from that standpoint. You've seen people trying to get themselves back up. And I know that a lot of folks do come from the prosecutor's office. That's a different life experience and a different way of looking at justice and looking at the application of law. And we need both, for sure.
Yes, sir.
But at the same time, that understanding of humanity, that understanding of society as it is in Central Ohio, you clearly have a strong grasp on that, which is really, really wonderful. What else do we need to know? We're moving on here a little bit, but what else do we need to know as we head to the voting polls here in a couple months about Will Ireland and what Will Ireland brings to the bench?
I appreciate that. I ask that you remember in November Will Ireland. I will bring not only experience, I'll bring a respectful and solemn abidance to the Constitution, which is my sworn duty to uphold. And I look forward to serving the community in whatever capacity in the future. My election, the election that from Franklin County Municipal Court that I'm running in, has two experienced practitioners, one a former prosecutor. And you know what? He's a good man. He's a hard worker. And whatever happens at the outcome of this election, the public, there's no loss to the public here. The public becomes the winner in my election. I look forward, if elected, to serving and taking care of this community with the utmost compassion, empathy, and also, and I think principally, the assurance that I will protect the community and, frankly, when necessary, remove those folks who represent a threat to our community that's of profound importance and principal importance. So I thank you for the opportunity to address your listening public. And There's a lovely studio and a
it's just a room
experience. It is, and a nice one at that.
Thanks. Well, folks, Will Ireland, clearly a man of service, clearly someone who is committed, not just in words but in deeds as well, to being an agent of positive change. Consider Will when you head to the polls. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks for giving us your time to listen. You've been listening to Fill in the Blank with Shawn Parker, where we talk about the issues of politics and the geopolitical marketplace, as well as economics. If you like our channel, please subscribe to us at Fill in the Blank on YouTube, and be sure to listen every week as we come back to you with some of the most thought-provoking people of the day. And learning is always the key to what we're trying to do.